Hey guys, welcome to an all new episode of HBFIT TV. We have Rebecca Allen here, who is the founder of Rebecca Allen Shoes, and we're going to get kind of a sneak peek of what it looks like for a founder to put together a company from start to finish, and then we're going to show you what these shoes look like and what they're all about and their message, which, if I have it correct, this is kind of what I've been telling people. Like, I'm like, oh yeah, have you heard about Rebecca Allen Shoes? And it's all about making nude shoes that are actually in the shades of your skin.
Yeah.
So crazy concept, right? But I love the idea that you've kind of taken foundation matching and applying that to shoes.
Yeah, exactly. So we say foundation for your feet. Exactly.
Right.
So you're exactly right. And totally, this was very much born out of my pain point, being a Black woman and seeing that this, concept of nude was so prolific for footwear. Particularly, I used to work in finance, and every woman in my office, mostly white women, had this nude shoe. But when I went out to find mine, I couldn't. And it was not only frustrating, right, because this is such a functional wardrobe item, just like staple, goes with everything,
Sure.
Whether it's a pump or a flat or sandal. But it was also like, how could none of these brands or retailers even think about me as a consumer?
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'm a pretty good consumer, so
Right.
why are you just
Yeah.
totally overlooking me? And so I started tinkering around with it, doing some research, learning that nude is the second most purchased color after black.
Wow.
So, sorry, this is kind of like my pitch mode, but I was like, oh, okay, this is really out there. It's not just me kind of, wondering if this is a pain point. So,
Right.
huge business. And then when you think about women of color, right, not just black, but very inclusively, I define color very broadly, who are just being, at best maybe an afterthought.
Sure.
When we're seeing stuff like Fenty Beauty and all of these other kind of product categories that are thinking about nude in a very inclusive way.
Yeah.
My question was like, why not footwear? And then the question was kind of like, well, why am I waiting for somebody else to do this?
Sure.
Why not me?
Right.
And I had the good fortune of having an old friend who's in the footwear industry.
Okay.
Family business for years and years. So some of the kind of product development was maybe a little easier than it would have been if I was just really starting from scratch.
Sure.
So felt that I was in a position to put a really solid product out into the market. And we tested dozens and dozens of swatches on all different women's skin to arrive at these 5 shades, which I feel pretty good about. I think it can get better.
Yeah.
I think ultimately, we'll hopefully be able to offer additional colors.
Okay.
Really have a customization
Sure.
element to it. But for now, we started with 5. It's not like foundation where it needs to match exactly.
Right. Right.
There's definitely wiggle room there. And there's certainly no wrong way to do it. We have women who buy 3 shades,
Sure.
you kind of do it up and down. So
Right.
It's great.
And when you were kind of in this first phase, like of testing swatches and prototyping like the type of actual shoe that you wanted, were you still in a full-time job at that point?
Yeah, so when I started prototyping, I was still working full-time. I was doing investment management at Goldman, and I was just like emailing China, at
Right.
night and
Right.
going and like waiting for product to come in. We ultimately we don't make the shoes in China. We ultimately work with an agent and manufacturer in Brazil.
Oh, wow.
That does beautiful leather down there, beautiful product. Some great brands are also produced in the factory that I use.
Okay.
So felt good about that. But yeah, it was kind of like, am I really doing this? And
Yeah.
every day was just kind of like, well, just do the next little thing. Just like do the next thing, and breaking it down into measurable steps.
Right.
And then all of a sudden it was kind of like, oh, well, you got this thing.
So what was the day like when you said bye-bye to Goldman?
It was scary. but it kind of exhilarating.
Sure.
I think, and I was talking to somebody else about this. I think I give really bad advice for people who are like thinking about leaving their jobs.
I was going to say,
because
so literally people always ask me, well, how do you know when to leave your full-time job and pursue your passion?
Yeah. I frame the risk a little differently, and the story is still being written, so, don't listen to me, or do, I don't know. But I think people think, well, if I fail, then what am I going to do? But I think about it as, if you're thinking about like what's a worst case scenario, maybe you'll go back to the career that you had before, or maybe you'll have gained this skill set that you never would have otherwise had, and you're that much stronger of a candidate for whatever that next thing that you go do is. I think people think that if they fail, that they'll never be employable again, or they'll never be able to kind of like get back in gear. And I think that that's wholly untrue. So I think kind of reframing the risk is maybe.
I completely agree with that. I think that there's inevitably going to be some failures along your path, and that you actually just have to embrace that to kind of figure out how much more rewarding and better the successes will be.
Right.
Like I certainly felt that way as well when I started my first company, and then it failed, and I felt like, oh my God, what am I going to do? How am I going to reinvent myself? But then sure enough, I did, and I talk about that failure as a very pivotal point for my personal and business growth.
Yeah. I think, and I also think that whether you're having those small failures within business kind of growing up, or it's something that you kind of scrap and wipe the slate clean.
Yeah.
It's all learning.
Totally.
Right? But I think if it's eating at your core, then what do you have to lose?
Right.
But you certainly can't be half-assing it.
Totally. So what do you, tell me some of the things, obviously, that are some of the challenges that you've faced with running your own company and kind of starting something from the ground up.
Yeah, so so the business has been I have a couple investors, have put some of my own capital behind it, and have spent a lot of focus on getting the shoes kind of in these spheres of influence, really thinking about these pockets that we can ignite and how we can kind of build an organic community. Because the vision for the brand is so much more about the woman who's wearing it than it is about any particular product that we're selling.
Right.
I really felt that there was a missing space in a brand story for Black women and for women of color, and to really feel seen and see something that was a reflection of us.
Right.
And so there's a challenge in telling that story.
Yeah.
Because we are an inclusive brand. So I think that's something that's iterative, and we're still fine-tuning how we tell that story. Physically, we do offline kind of real life selling events and networking events. We also, are trying to build this community online too. So we're constantly trying to figure out how to balance being a brand that really is here for everybody, but we're specifically holding this group of women in a special light because for so long, so many brands have otherwise ignored us.
Right.
And so I'd say that's a challenge. I think, as a Black female founder, talking to institutional capital is also a challenge.
Yeah.
That's been widely documented.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
Nothing new, right?
Yeah.
But that's, and it's interesting for consumer retail too, because it's not a tech enterprise business that is going to be worth billions of dollars ever, right? I mean, that would be great, but that's not true. So it's also telling a big story, because this is a real demographic that has real spending power that you can really galvanize and steal market share from incumbent brands. And I think when you're not part of that population, which most of most investors are not, right? You don't necessarily see that customer. You don't necessarily
Sure.
know how powerful they are, or know
Sure.
how numerous they are,
Right,
or any
especially
of that.
when brands aren't focusing on that consumer, that
Yeah.
they're constantly seeing what comes through their desk, which is
Yeah.
kind of leaving them out of that conversation.
Yeah.
When you think about your brand, what kind of, and your consumer, what are some retailers that you really imagine Rebecca Allen being sold at?
That's a great question. So I think Nordstrom for me is like a big, I think in terms of price point, I think in terms of product mix, I think in terms of like where they are geographically and their online presence, I think this is like a no-brainer for a Nordstrom.
Right.
And while we are a digitally native brand, I built the business with that kind of omni-channel distribution
Sure.
capacity in mind.
Yeah.
Because I think the future of retail is, and this is no secret, but right, you have to have an online presence, you have to have an offline presence,
Right.
and your business has to be able to withstand all of that from a margin perspective. So,
Sure.
So yeah, I think Nordstrom is great. I think there are also lots of like smaller boutiques in different cities. You know, some of the grow up that we're seeing online is coming from smaller cities where you know, the customer she looks a little different like in New York than she does in Cleveland or
Right.
Atlanta, right? So I think there's also an opportunity to be kind of very local too.
Right.
We also had like a reverse inquiry from a boutique in like Sweden, and
Oh,
I was
wow.
like,
That's cool.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah, if you want to carry some shoes, let's
Yeah,
talk.
sure. Love that.
I don't know how many women of color are there.
Probably few. But speaking of Sweden and Swedes and women of color, we were talking earlier about how do we create this conversation around inclusiveness when at the core of everything that we've been talking about, which is like diversity in beauty, fashion, entrepreneurship, like the whole thing, how do we include others like in this conversation to really elevate the conversation? Because I find that if you don't include like white women in the conversation about inclusiveness, or men in the conversation around feminism, that we have this inherent like segregation of how we're thinking about the conversation, and then nothing's actually getting done because it's not a group effort. It's like it's separated.
Right. Like it's great for us to sit down and chat about it
And
but
feel
what did
empowered
right,
ourselves,
but,
sure.
Like, what did we actually accomplish?
Right, but how are we making it different for the overall conversation and like the global like perspective?
Yeah, I think that's a really big challenge, and I think like big corporations are struggling with how to kind of navigate that, right? Like from Fortune 500 all the way on down. I think you really need to have highly motivated stakeholders on the part of the majority group, whether that's white women in the case of talking about like the intersectionality of feminism, or white men if you're talking just about like whatever. Like you need to have I think you need to have people who are really going to listen and then be advocates,
Right.
who aren't just doing it for
Like
a promotion or for their,
Right.
like who really can sift through it. And I think it's really hard to find those people because
Totally.
Because it's really hard to ask somebody to care about something that doesn't
affect them.
Yeah.
I know, I agree.
And I think that's why then people get closed out, because they're,
or unless it happens to them personally, where it's like their best friend or their sister or some, has gone through this like traumatic experience, and they're understanding it firsthand.
Yeah.
But it's like we can't wait for those traumatic experiences to be the catalyst for this type of change.
Right.
But how do you get the people to like fundamentally care?
Yeah. I always felt like I feel like
it's so much easier not to care.
Right. Or to say, well, I'm not racist, or I'm not misogynist because you're not being confronted with it.
Right.
When, if you know kind of what you don't know about yourself.
Yeah.
I just feel like.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I you know, it's also, I think on my part, I think it's not shutting out people who are willing to have the conversation and who want to be good listeners too, right? I think it's really easy to say like, you don't know what you're talking about, get out of here.
Sure.
But having some space for people who want to really sit down and have a conversation.
I know, and I personally find myself doing that sometimes as well. Like sometimes I'll be starting to have a conversation with someone and I'm like, well, what do you really know about this?
Right.
And I almost am like, why am I having this conversation with you? But the fact of the matter is that they asked because they were they wanted to know and they wanted to be a part of the conversation, which again, what I was saying before, it's like we have to be able to recognize that and like leave whatever animosity at the door.
But there's also like a piece of inference that like that people have to like catch up. I feel like people of color spend so much time living in like white spaces, so you kind of like know all about it, so you don't have you kind of know it.
Sure, whereas it's not the opposite.
Yeah, so when people think that they're asking a benign question, sometimes it's like, give me a break, like you like catch up,
right,
like
yeah.
like I shouldn't have to explain to you like, whatever like black cultural thing this is, like you could go I don't know, go Google it, like don't come to me acting innocent, right?
I agree.
Like, take a minute or just like infer it, right?
Sure.
Like you live in this world too,
right?
So I think it's tough. Like that's really, it's like,
totally.
Okay, like where do you draw the line? Like what should someone know? What is it okay to ask? Like all of that stuff. It's gritty.
Totally gritty. So speaking of grit, we should get back to the shoes.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so I am wearing, which style am I wearing right now?
So this is our two-strap. And this is our nude 3. Yeah.
Love.
Which is our middle shade.
Don't mind my feet because they're unmoisturized and like I haven't had a pedicure in months, but
that's okay. My feet are covered because you don't even want to see my toes. But yeah, so these are, we have 3 styles that we've launched. So we've got the sandal. We have like a pump, which was our first style.
Okay.
That was very much like for my working ladies.
Yeah.
And the shoe that I was desperately missing in my closet when I was wearing, like biz cash, biz formal. And then we've got this awesome flat, which is like your pop around town.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I brought you, because I think one of the other things is like, it's tricky with the colors because people are like, oh, well, what color should I be? And I never want to tell people what their skin color is.
Sure.
So I brought a couple of our shades. Let me see. I'm just reaching in front of you. So because we have, we'll have women who, like I said, buy a couple different shades just because they're not colors that you see often.
My nails, I can't do anything with these things.
Oh, there we go. So this is our nude 2, which is like we've got lots of paper in there. It's a very brilliant unboxing experience. So this is more of like a chocolate.
Yeah.
And then we've got one shade darker than this. That's almost like a mahogany. Like
Ooh,
a very
beautiful.
Kind of a cool brown. And then on the lighter end, this is like, all my white ladies love this one.
Oh, that's so pretty.
It's got like a little bit of a warm undertone, so it makes everybody look nice and, not pale.
Yeah, like nice and like bronze little. And so this is the nude 3.
So you're wearing the nude 3, which is the middle shade,
Okay.
which really looks great on everybody. Like when people are like, oh, I'm not sure, I'm like, get nude 3. Like everybody likes it. There's no wrong way to do it.
Sure.
You could go lighter, you could go darker. There's really no wrong way.
Wait, this is amazing.
Yeah, and then
isn't it crazy that it's 2019 and like this concept like didn't exist?
It's crazy. It's crazy because it's like everybody needs this shoe in their closet. Like you need it. My closet for work was like fully devoid of color because I didn't have a
Sure.
Yeah. You know, if you want to wear a navy suit, if you want to wear a floral print, it's just like you want to not have to think about what shoe goes with it.
Absolutely.
And these just make you look taller, longer.
Yeah.
Whatever. It's
Into
great.
it.
Yeah.
I kind of need a pair of flats as well.
Yeah, we'll send them to you.
Okay, amazing. Okay, so where can people find Rebecca Allen right now?
So we're online now at rebecca-allen.com. Our Instagram handle is RebeccaAllenNY.
Okay.
And we we post events that we're doing online, on the site, in our email, and we've got stuff going on kind of, you know, major cities all around town.
Amazing.
Yeah, so and we've got a lot of exciting stuff coming in 2019, so.
I love that.
Yeah.
So if you're into our combo, let us know, like and comment below. You can subscribe to more HBFIT TV right over here. And yeah, thanks so much for watching, and go buy yourself a pair of shoes.